Last time we ended with a question, and I hope it has been living somewhere in the back of your mind since. When did you first become aware that you exist? Maybe for you it was a moment in childhood, catching your own eyes in a mirror and suddenly feeling the strangeness of it. Maybe it was as a teenager, alone at night under the sky. Maybe it hasn't happened yet. Maybe it is happening right now, in the middle of an ordinary day, as you feel the full, dizzy weight of being here. Different moments, different lives, and yet I suspect the same recognition underneath them all. The same inexplicable sense of, there is something it feels like to be me. How is that possible? How can something so deeply personal, so utterly private, be something nearly every human being recognizes? Today we are going to look at one of the most beautiful ideas in all of mathematics. An idea so simple a child could grasp its surface, and so deep that it reaches all the way to the question of whether a machine could ever truly understand anything at all. It is called isomorphism, and it begins with a letter, a rose, and an argument about where meaning actually lives.
What are you reading?
A letter from an old friend.
What language?
Greek, of course.
Interesting. I have the same letter. In Latin.
That's impossible. It's private correspondence.
And yet? Shall we compare?
The meaning is exactly the same.
So where does the letter live? In the marks on the page or in the structure beneath them?
In the structure. The symbols carry it, and yet the structures differ completely. Yes,
But the meaning arrived. Meaning survives the journey. A kind of invariant.
like flame, still fire whether the wood is oak or pine.
Exactly. Mathematicians call this an isomorphism, equal form, not appearance, architecture.
So the letters are not truly isomorphic.
No, the strict isomorphism lives elsewhere. And whether structure alone carries meaning, that is a much harder question.
Where?
Tell me, do you know what this is?
A rose, obviously.
How do you know?
I can see it, smell it, touch it.
And if I only said the word rose,
Would you know? Of course. The word carries the meaning.
does it carry all of the meaning? Keep that somewhere safe.
Isomorphism, equal form. The idea that two completely different structures can be mapped onto each other in a way that preserves all the relationships between their elements. It sounds like a mathematical technicality. And in mathematics, it is exactly that, precise, formal, and indifferent to meaning. Hofstadter's argument, the argument that will carry us through this entire series, is that when a structural correspondence exists within a system rich enough and active enough and sufficiently self referential, something we call meaning appears, not from a structure alone, but from a structure turned inward on itself until the system notices what it is doing. That leap from a structure to meaning is what we're going to explore today. Let me show you 3 places where this lives each one more surprising than the last. Consider a vinyl record. Pressed into its surface is a spiral groove, a physical valley in plastic, twisting microscopically from side to side. It looks nothing like music. It makes no sound sitting on a shelf. And yet, the shape of that groove corresponds continuously to the shape of a sound wave. As the needle traces the groove, those tiny deviations become vibrations in the air, and the vibrations become sound. The structure survives every translation. The groove and the music are completely different physical things, but the relationships inside one are perfectly preserved in the other. In that precise sense, one is a structural image of the other. The music is not in the plastic. It is not in the air when the speaker moves. It is in the pattern, the structure of relationships that survives each change of medium. The medium changes, the message essentially does not. A musical score is a set of marks on paper, dots at particular heights, lines that indicate duration, symbols that instruct a musician. The marks make no sound, they are ink, silent. And yet, a trained musician looks at those marks and hears, not approximately, but precisely. The pattern in the marks is isomorphic to the pattern in the sound. One maps perfectly onto the other. Then the sound reaches a listener, and something appears that was not in the marks and not in the sound itself. Emotion, memory, the particular ache of a melody heard at the wrong moment or the right one. The isomorphism carries the structure all the way from ink to feeling, but somewhere along that chain, something is added, something the notation never contained. And then there is language itself, which I want to use as an example but carefully, because language is not quite what the first two examples were. Right now, I'm making sounds with my mouth. Those sounds travel through the air. They reach your ears, which convert them to electrical signals, which travel to your brain, and somehow a thought appears. Something of what I intended crosses the space between us. Now, is that a strict isomorphism? Not really. A strict isomorphism requires a precise element by element correspondence with no remainder. Language has nothing like that. Words carry different connotations for different people. Some concepts exist in one language and not another. Meaning leaks and shifts and transforms in translation. What arrives in your mind is not a perfect copy of what I placed in the sounds. So, language is, strictly speaking, a loose use of the term. It is an approximate, lossy, context related meaning transfer system. Some of the structure survives the journey, some is transformed, some is lost entirely. And that gap, the part that doesn't survive, turns out to be one of the most important things we could possibly study, because it is exactly where the question of understanding lives. The meaning is never fully in the symbol. The closest it comes is in the pattern the symbols make together, and what bridges the final gap, if anything does, may be something that no pattern can fully encode.
I've been thinking about isomorphism.
I'm delighted to hear it.
If meaning lives in relationships, not symbols, then a machine assessing the same patterns as a human brain would be thinking?
That is the question, isn't it?
Well, is it?
When you hear the word rose, do you smell anything?
Not exactly. There's something, a trace of the idea of the smell.
And if I show a machine the word rose again and again and again in millions of contexts, so that it learns every relationship between that word and every other word, will it smell anything?
I don't know.
Neither do I. And that is not a small admission.
But the machine would know everything about the world, every association, every context.
Yes, and someone who has read every description of the color red, without ever seeing it, knows much about red. But do they see it?
There's something missing between the pattern and the experience of the pattern.
Qualia, the redness of red, the painfulness of pain, the smell of a rose on a summer morning, the felt quality of experience itself, and whether any structure, however precise, however vast, can fully encode experience, is one of the great unanswered questions of human thought.
And you think machines don't have it? I think we do not yet know.
And worse, we do not yet know how we would know.
That's rather unsettling.
Or rather exciting, depending on your disposition.
I want to tell you about a moment from my own life when this question, the gap between pattern and experience, became very real to me. During my PhD in astrophysics, I worked on a group of stars called M dwarfs, small, cool red stars, the most common kind in our galaxy, all invisible to the naked eye. I spent months with their data, numbers on a screen, surface temperature, luminosity, estimated mass, radius, rotation period. I knew these stars the way you might know a friend's biography, every measurable fact about them, where they were, how they moved, what they were made of. And then one day, I don't remember which day or why then and not before, I looked at two names in my dataset, YZCMI, EVLAC, stars I had been analyzing for months. And I felt something odd. These were not empty numbers on a page. These were actual stars, light years away, moving through our galaxy right now as I sat at my desk. If I pointed a telescope at them, all I would receive would be a tiny stream of photons, a whisper of light that had been traveling for years before it reached me. And yet I knew them. The numbers had built a kind of knowledge that felt inexplicably, illogically, like proximity, like presence. It felt so good. The data was, in a real sense, isomorphic to the stars. The pattern of numbers mapped onto the physical reality of those burning ancient distant objects. And in the space between the data and my mind, something appeared that wasn't in either. Something that felt like wonder. I had never actually seen YZCMI. I've never seen it with my own eyes. Point a telescope at it and you get a few photons, that's all. And yet, I carry it with me somewhere. The way you carry a person you have only ever known through their letters. Could a machine have felt what I felt that day? It could process the same numbers. It could know every relationship in that data set far better and faster than I ever could. Would it feel the stars? I don't know. But I noticed that the question does not feel trivial to me. And I think that noticing is worth something. In 1980, a philosopher named John Searle proposed a thought experiment. He called it the Chinese room. Imagine a person in a room. They speak no Chinese, but they have a perfect rule book for responding to any Chinese symbol with the correct Chinese symbol. Someone outside passes in questions. The person follows the rules, passes back perfect answers. From outside, the room appears to understand Chinese. From inside, there is no understanding, only rule following. Searle's argument: syntax is not the same as semantics. Processing symbols correctly is not the same as understanding them. This is one of the most contested ideas in the philosophy of mind. Many brilliant people think Searle is wrong. Many think he is right. The debate has not been resolved in 46 years, and it has become more urgent, not less, as the machines grow more sophisticated. What I can tell you is what I believe, as someone who has stood on both sides of the question, as a scientist who lived inside the numbers, and as a human being who felt the stars. The pattern can carry you very far, across light years, across the gap between two minds. It is the most extraordinary transfer system we have. But at the end of the journey, there may be something waiting that the pattern itself cannot contain. Perhaps meaning is not in the symbol and not in the mind alone, but in the particular conversation between them. Every episode of this series carries a question that Hofstadter could not have asked in 1979, because the world that makes it urgent did not yet exist. Here is the one this episode raises. We have been talking about isomorphism, the idea that meaning can live in a pattern and that the pattern can survive translation across completely different physical substrates. A vinyl groove becomes a sound wave, becomes a vibration in the air, becomes a signal in your ear. The structure survives every crossing. Now, consider what a large language model actually does. It is trained on more text than any human being could read in 1,000 lifetimes. It learns the statistical relationships between words, which words appear near which other words, in which context, with what frequency. It learns in a very real sense the pattern of relationships in human language. Is that isomorphism? Is the model's internal structure isomorphic to meaning the way the vinyl groove is isomorphic to the music? The groove is isomorphic to the sound wave because both preserve the same relational structure. But preserving structure is not the same as touching reality. Stephen Harnett gave this problem a name in 1990, the symbol grounding problem. A system that only ever manipulates symbols in relation to other symbols never actually touches the things those symbols are supposed to mean. A language model learns that rose appears near fragrant and red and thorn, but it has never encountered a fragrant thing, a red thing, or something sharp. The model's representation of rose corresponds to patterns of relationships among other words, whether it is isomorphic to the rose, to the thing itself, is exactly what remains unresolved. That gap may be unbridgeable by current architectures, or future architectures may narrow it in ways we don't yet understand. But the question, what the structure corresponds to, and whether that correspondence is enough, is the one this episode has been circling all along. We will return to it every episode.
You kept it.
I always keep the important things.
The word rose carries something of the pattern, something of the structure, not all of it. We said that,
We did.
but the word doesn't smell like anything.
No.
And if a machine learned every context the word has ever appeared in, every poem, every love letter, every botanical description, would it smell anything?
Do you smell anything?
Yes, of course.
From the word?
No, from the rose.
Then perhaps some things require more than description. The pattern may carry you very far, across oceans, across light years. And yet there remains the question of whether any system complex enough to seek its own ground can ever fully stand on it.
That's either very comforting or very lonely.
Yes, I find it is usually both.
Isomorphism tells us something extraordinary, that meaning can travel through grooves in plastic, through ink on paper, through numbers describing stars light years away, as long as the pattern survives the journey. And it is honest with us about its limits. Language, for all its power, is not a strict isomorphism. Something is always lost or transformed in the crossing. And that gap, the part that does not survive, is where the most urgent questions of our time now live. Because we are building systems that process the patterns of human language with extraordinary precision, and we do not yet know whether pattern alone is enough, whether the rose, if mapped precisely enough, eventually becomes something that can be smelled. We've only touched the second thread of this braid. In the next episode, we are going to look at where the patterns come from in the first place, at what Hofstadter calls a formal system, and what it means that a small set of symbols governed by simple rules can generate infinite complexity. This is the machinery underneath everything, underneath Gödel's proof, underneath DNA, underneath the architecture of the mind itself. But before you go, the question I want to leave you with this time. Is there something you have learned only from description, from a book, a number, a word, a map, that only became truly real when you finally experienced it directly? Tell me in the comments. I want to know where the pattern ends and where you begin. I see you in the next step.
Achilles and the Tortoise were borrowed by Hofstadter from Lewis Carroll's 1895 essay, What the Tortoise Said to Achilles, itself a philosophical dialogue about the impossibility of completing a logical argument. Carroll borrowed them from Zeno, a strange loop of literary inheritance.